The unthinkable has just unfolded. India, the very country Washington once trusted to stand firm against China, has now extended its hand to Beijing. After a high-level meeting with China's Foreign Minister Wang, New Delhi is signaling what many thought could never happen: the possibility of aligning more closely with China than with the United States.
Donald Trump's sudden, inexplicable hostility toward India reverses policies pursued under 5 administrations, including his own previous one. If it holds, this reversal may be the biggest strategic mistake of the Trump presidency so far.
For Donald Trump, this is a direct challenge to the vision he has sold for years. The promise was that tariffs would isolate Beijing and lock allies in behind Washington. But instead, the global picture is shifting, and fast. And while Trump continues to boast about America winning, China has been quietly building something far greater. In the shadows of the trade conflict, Beijing has stitched together a vast economic web across the global south. Its exports to developing nations now exceed $1 trillion a year. From Latin America to Southeast Asia, Chinese goods, investments, and factories are becoming the backbone of growth. China is no longer just exporting products. It is exporting its technological future. If India is moving closer to China, and if much of the developing world is already leaning toward Beijing, what does that mean for America's place at the top? Stay with us, because what looks like a routine diplomatic visit may turn out to be a turning point in world politics. What just happened in New Delhi could reshape Asia's balance of power. China's Foreign Minister Wang has landed in India, a moment that carries far more weight than a routine diplomatic stop. It is the first time in more than 3 years that a Chinese official of this rank has set foot in the country, and the timing makes it especially significant. For decades, India and China have been rivals. Their history is marked by conflict. A war in 1962, deadly clashes along the Himalayan border as recently as 2020, and years of frozen relations that followed. New Delhi banned Chinese apps, cut Chinese investment, and leaned closer to the United States, particularly as Prime Minister Narendra Modi built a personal rapport with Donald Trump. But this visit signals a different chapter. India and China are reopening channels that were firmly shut. Direct flights between the two countries are preparing to resume. Beijing has eased restrictions on vital fertilizer ingredients that India's agriculture depends on. Most strikingly, both sides are discussing border trade routes again. Wang is presenting the idea that India and China should work as partners rather than adversaries. For Washington, this development is deeply unsettling. The divide between India and China had been one of America's greatest advantages in Asia. That wedge allowed Washington to court New Delhi as a counterweight to Beijing. If that gap narrows, U.S. influence in the region weakens. 1. Why is this shift happening now? The answer lies in Washington's own policies. Donald Trump built his foreign strategy on pressure, tariffs against friends and foes alike, restrictions on what countries could buy, and blunt demands for compliance. For a time, India tried to play along. Modi positioned India as an active member of the Quad alliance with the United States, Japan, and Australia, a grouping designed to contain China's rise. America welcomed this role, seeing India as its strongest card in Asia. But pressure soon turned into strain. When Washington demanded that India stop importing Russian oil, New Delhi refused. Energy security is non-negotiable for India. Cheap oil from Russia kept inflation in check for hundreds of millions of people. Abandoning it would have been economic self-sabotage. That refusal exposed the limits of the partnership. Instead of treating India as a strategic equal, U.S. officials began to lecture and threaten. Sanctions warnings circulated, and the tone shifted from partnership to command. For India, a nation intent on being seen as an independent power, this was unacceptable. China moved quickly to seize the moment. Wang Yi's visit comes with gestures designed to build trust: reopened flight routes, loosened exports, revived trade talks. India's willingness to respond shows that New Delhi is no longer content to be seen as Washington's instrument in Asia. So Trump has succeeded in uniting the two Asian giants. Although this doesn't erase the mistrust between India and China. The border dispute remains unresolved, and competition still runs deep. But the message is clear. India intends to act on its own terms, balancing its relationships rather than blindly following American directives. And Wang Yi's arrival in New Delhi is the clearest indication yet that the conversation between Asia's two giants has started again. To see the full weight of Wang Yi's visit, we need to step back and connect it to the larger picture. What happens if India and China, the two largest nations in Asia, begin working more closely together? The answer is straightforward. American influence takes a serious hit. Consider BRICS. For years, one of its biggest weaknesses has been the mistrust between New Delhi and Beijing. That friction kept BRICS from evolving into a genuine alternative to the Western-led G7. But if India and China set aside even part of their rivalry, the equation changes overnight. With Russia providing energy, Brazil contributing food exports, and South Africa offering minerals, BRICS could transform into a powerful economic bloc capable of challenging US dominance on the global stage. We're already seeing hints of this shift. Despite years of political hostility, trade between India and China still exceeds $135 billion annually. Now imagine what could happen if barriers were reduced further, if border trade routes across the Himalayas reopened, or if long-term infrastructure agreements took shape. Even small gestures would mark an important step towards stabilizing ties. That's why Wang Yi's presence in New Delhi carries such weight. This isn't only about resolving border disputes. It's a test to see whether India is ready to carve out more independence in its foreign policy, less tethered to Washington, more focused on its own strategic interests. Trump's approach has played a central role in driving India down this path. His reliance on tariffs, his dismissive tone toward allies, and his heavy-handed demands have had the opposite effect of what he intended. Rather than isolating China, he has encouraged countries like India to reconsider their options. Rather than weakening BRICS, he has created conditions for it to strengthen. So where does this lead? If dialogue between India and China gains momentum, we could witness a surge in bilateral trade and a far more coordinated BRICS. India, rather than tying itself entirely to Washington, may continue balancing between the United States, Russia, and China while preserving its freedom of choice. And across the global South, governments observing this shift may feel emboldened to resist American pressure more openly. What appears on the surface as a routine diplomatic meeting could, in fact, mark a turning point in global politics. Two of Asia's most populous nations, after decades of conflict and mistrust, are reopening channels of dialogue, precisely at the moment when America's pressure tactics are reaching their peak. This moment reveals something critical. US dominance, built on old formulas of pressure and loyalty, is no longer working. Countries are charting their own course. And when a nation as large and influential as India chooses to move in this direction, the global balance of power begins to shift in profound ways. Let's take a wider look, because what's unfolding between India and China is just one part of a much larger transformation. While Washington has been busy imposing tariffs on anyone who defies it, Beijing has been quietly redirecting the very foundation of its economy toward the global South. And the scale of this shift is staggering. According to the latest data, China now exports around $1.6 trillion worth of goods to developing nations every year. To put that into perspective, that's more than half again as much as what it sells to the United States and Europe combined. For decades, conventional wisdom held that China's growth was tied to Western consumers. Analysts insisted that without American and European markets, Beijing's economy would falter. Today, the opposite is true. The global South has become China's most important customer. How did this reversal happen? Once again, the roots trace back to Washington's policies. Donald Trump believed tariffs would cripple China's export machine. He thought that by closing American markets, Beijing would be forced into submission. But instead of folding, China built new doors where old ones were shut. It expanded trade across Africa, invested heavily in Latin America, and deepened its economic ties with the Middle East. Projects like the Belt and Road Initiative created highways, railways, and digital links that plugged dozens of nations directly into China's supply chain. The result is a new global trade map, one where Beijing is the partner of choice not in Washington or Brussels, but in Nairobi, São Paulo, Riyadh, and Jakarta. And exports are only part of the story. Chinese investment abroad is now reshaping economies across the developing world. Last year, for the first time in history, Chinese companies invested more outside their borders than at home. Remarkably, those outflows even surpassed U.S. foreign investment. That milestone signals something profound. Beijing is no longer focused primarily on its domestic economy. It is embedding itself worldwide. Factories, ports, railways, power plants, digital networks. China is planting stakes in every region, from lithium mines in Latin America to solar farms in Africa. These are not just business ventures. They are strategic moves designed to create influence, build dependencies, and secure long-term partnerships that Washington's tariffs cannot reach. And here's the irony. The more Washington tried to isolate China, the faster this pivot accelerated. Tariffs were supposed to contain Beijing, but instead, they pushed it to expand, diversify, and entrench itself across the global south. Now let's focus on the industry that best captures this global transformation: electric vehicles. Over the past decade, China has built the world's largest EV industry, and today, it accounts for more than 60% of all electric cars sold worldwide. But what's striking is that Chinese companies are no longer satisfied with dominating their domestic market. They are moving outward, embedding themselves across the globe. This year, for the first time, Chinese EV makers invested more money in foreign operations than at home. Entire factories are rising in Europe. Distribution networks are spreading across Southeast Asia. And markets in Africa and Latin America are opening up to affordable Chinese-made cars that undercut Western rivals. This is Beijing's new going global strategy. It is not only about selling products, but about placing Chinese companies directly inside other economies, where they create jobs, supply infrastructure, and build long-term influence. Why does this matter so much? First, the EV sector is the future of global transportation. Whoever leads in EVs will lead in auto manufacturing for decades to come. Right now, that leader is China. US and European car makers are weighed down by higher costs, while Chinese models are cheaper, faster to scale, and supported by massive state funding. Second, EV supply chains rely on critical resources like lithium, cobalt, and nickel, most of which lie in the global south. By expanding its companies abroad, China is not just selling vehicles. It is securing access to the raw materials that keep the entire industry running. Control the resources, control the technology, and you control the market. Third, these overseas investments create a new layer of political influence. When a country like Brazil or Thailand hosts a Chinese EV factory, it doesn't just get an industrial boost. It begins to align with China as a strategic partner, because its future jobs, growth, and technologies are tied to Beijing's success. That kind of loyalty cannot be undone by tariffs or speeches from Washington. Taken together, it's clear that Trump's strategy has backfired. Instead of isolating China, it has sped up its expansion into markets where America has little leverage. Instead of reinforcing US dominance, it has handed Beijing an opportunity to lead the global south into a new economic era. So when we see Wang land in New Delhi, when trade routes reopen and flights resume, it isn't just about two neighbors thawing relations. It is the opening chapter of a broader realignment in global power. The age when America set the rules is fading. A new age is beginning. One where China and its partners build a system of their own. And that raises the ultimate question. Will the United States adapt to this new reality? Or will it be left behind as others write the rules of the future? Make sure you're subscribed, because what comes next could redefine the world economy in ways we've never seen before.